Normally, when I do a Cutter Simpsons Unhinged intro, I just basically tell you about all the episodes I've done so far and the topics and all that. Of course, it goes 3 to 5 minutes, but whatever. But I'm going to do something different because it's a national holiday in Canada where I live. Well, if you want to know where I live in Kitchener, Ontario, home of the Canadian Junior Champion Kitchener Rangers. But anyway, it is July the 1st. It's a special midweek episode of Cutter Simpsons Unhinged because, obviously I don't work on the national holiday of Canada. And, wearing my Canada soccer shirt, playing Morocco in the round of 16 on the 4th of July, which is the ironic part because Canada is playing soccer on the U.S. Independence Day, July 4th, and the Americans are playing today against Bosnia on Canada's Independence Day, July 1st. How ironic. Anyway, I will be singing my country's national anthem, O Canada, with Simpson stuff. It's first day. So here we go. And, I can't sing on key. Oh, Springfield, where couch flakes glow and mischief gleams from monorail schemes. Your yellow legends never tire, with dough that rings from shore to shore and prank calls echoing evermore. We laugh with pride at every scene from Krusty's grin to sideshow of schemes. Keep watch the town, absurd and bright through nuclear glow and the TV light. May every chalkboard line begin another comic spin. Da 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 da. Poof. Of course, if you really want to know the episode stuff I talked about in order, Lisa Goes Gaga, that 90s episode, Homer and Bongo, Homer the Vet, the Olympics episode, Mod Steph episode, the 15 seasons Christmas episode, Principal and the Pauper, Homer approved, Lisa's vegetarian, Love is a many sprinkled thing, Tata Wildfire, Forsaken Me, F1, Lisa gets an F1, the gay marriage episode, Diary Queen, the Family Guy Simpsons episode 2014, Bart the Mother, the Italian Double Dip from season 17, Homer's Enemy, Kill Gill, the Simpsons movie, Homer and Ned's Hail Mary, Trash of the Titans, the FIFA episode, You Can't Live Like a Referee, Who Shot Mr. Burns, the Trails of Horror Stuff, and Homer's Phobia. We're going to be talking about the season 30 episode, Canada. Here we go. Jerkhouse Homer, Marge's worries, Bart's pranks, Lisa's causes, Maggie not talking a lot, Grandpa being senile, Patty and Selma boring Marge, Artie Sif is a jerk, Chief Wiggum making things happen, Mr. Burns being a dick. You can never stop the Simpsons. Heaven knows they've been trying for years and they still come back for more. 37 seasons is a bit much, don't you think? It's a crazy Simpsons. Something happens. A do 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 do. This is not a clip show. Have no fear. I've got topics for years. All right. So, what is with this whole thing with Lisa in a hospital bed surrounded by a Mountie and doctor and all that? Well, let me tell you. We're in season 30 and are having Doe Canada, April 2019. This is an amazing moment to have a Canadian based episode of The Simpsons. I will get to the Canadian Simpsons references stuff later on. However, let's talk about the episode. So Homer and family are at Mount Splashmore when Homer gets a notification that he needs to use his 2 million plus reward points or else they'll get rolled back. He takes his family to Upper New York by Niagara Falls. Along the way in Upper New York, Homer sings a song about how many Upper New York places like Shasta and Syracuse are basically being like losing their residents and all that. Of course, the Upper New York Chamber of Commerce was pissed off with Homer's song. Nevertheless, they're at Niagara Falls. Lisa and Bart are in their bubble balls and all that. And Lisa figures she can knock Bart out of the circle by using geometrical things. However, she did not think about one thing, and that was the wind. So the wind knocks Lisa over the bumper ball thing and into Niagara Falls, where the Canadians rescue her. She's put in hospital. Homer is not too happy with the bill. However, because of Canada's free healthcare network, she's safe. Whew, woohoo! However, Lisa is asked by the Mountie at her bedside about the United States, and Lisa basically says something about voter suppression and a president that's a son of a you know what. And this is 2019. This is in Trump's first term. This is in his second term when things have got worse. Trust me. Anyway, March seemingly tries to shut Lisa up and all that, fearing for things. Of course, this does play into Marge's psychosis. Remember, in the Simpsons movie, they got caught by surveillance, and Marge probably feels that people are surveilling her. That really tears you apart. Lisa is made to be a political prisoner, and she's actually given asylum and an NHL team. Lisa does not want Ottawa. Sorry, Lisa, you get Ottawa. Now, at the time in 2019, Ottawa sucked, but they're doing quite well, decently. Although they traded Brady Tkachuk to Florida, which was stupid. Nevertheless, Lisa thrives in her foster home. She actually goes to the Alanis Morissette public school, where one guy really wants them to do a play about Daddy Kravitz, the apprenticeship of Daddy Kravitz by Mordecai Richler. But they're doing The Handmaid's Tale. That actually filmed in Cambridge, Ontario, close to where I am. Nevertheless, Lisa feels at home and all that. She even gets to Skype Justin Trudeau and ask him about the Lavalin affair, which was real. And he flees. Marge is not too happy about it and makes plans to get Lisa back, becoming very much psychosis in the meantime, leaving Homer and Bart home. So she sneaks in Squeaky Voice Teen's car across the border and gets to Lisa's thing in Niagara Falls. She tries to tell Lisa America's good and all that, and then they are about to leave, but they're caught on deportation. So that means that Marge and Lisa are stuck in Canada. Marge tries to talk to Homer and Bart about things, and we find out that Homer and Bart are just by themselves, and there's pigs, like it's a pigsty. Nevertheless, Marge is not too bright about it. She wants to cross the border. Lisa's not so sure. She kind of thinks that America's got problems and all that. However, Marge tells Lisa to overlook the things and basically think about it. So, in essence, it did all that. She has a vision of American figures like Abraham Lincoln, Dumbo, Aretha Franklin, Eleanor Roosevelt, Seabiscuit, the computer Watson, Julie Bloom, and Louis Armstrong, who convinced her to go home. Lisa realizes that she can change American future for the future of things. So she decides to go home. And also the fact that people tell her that Canada is no saint either. Basically, that they actually discriminate against French Canadians, Alberta, and Newfoundland. And we see a Ralph Wiggum look-alike with a seal pup on his head singing a song. And of course, that pissed off the province of Newfoundland, obviously. So, anyhow, Lisa decides to go home. And, Homer and Bart have to come through to Canada to get them back. So they actually cross the Detroit River and seek refuge at the Pontiac Silverdome. Lions fans want it. Of course, the Silverdome is no longer that. I don't know what it is now, but it's not a football stadium. So anyway, they cross the border. Everything is fine and all that. So this episode kind of was my favorite Canadian episode because it did have some things and all that. So, a few things before we get to the Canadian explanation of stuff. Tim Long, one of the writers of Simpsons, said that Bart represented the qualities of the U.S. and Lisa represented the qualities of Canada. So it made sense for Lisa the one to stay in Canada. And, Tim Long wanted writing for that episode to be as late as possible for the Lavalin affair and all that. So, anyway, yeah, Homer's satirical song did not go well with the state of New York, and Newfoundland complained too. 1.9 million people watched this episode. Yeah, geez, come on. In the US. The AV Club gave this episode B minus, saying that it wanted to skewer its targets on the American side by having Lisa's infatuation of all things Canadian. Politeness, a young prime minister, and mounties with handsome horses, beavers, free healthcare, and schools to put on Canadian things. Shows the barbs more sharply and directly as uniform. The Den of Geek gave it 3.5 out of 5, saying that it was well done, but it's not as good as the classic episodes. The jock should be stronger and all that. But yeah, the musical mock salute to New York drew substantial attention from the natives in that area, including the Republican Committee of New York State, saying that Andrew Cuomo's policies made the region a laughingstock. And actually, the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle did a fact check. Most claims were true, but that some, like Fox News viewership and disability claims, were misleading and unprovable. The Great New York State Fair actually said that they took the song in jest and would invite the writers to the fair to allow them to see the area in person. So, anyway, yeah. And of course, the character resembling Ralph Wiggum beats up a baby. Sorry, doesn't wear that hat. He beats up a sealed pup plush toy and all that. And that was just pathetic and all that. So that was the episode in question. Now we got to talk about the whole thing with Simpsons in Canada and the infatuation. If you're watching the image, yes, that's Ralph Wiggum in a Mountie outfit. In the Simpsons episode Dust Bus, talking when they do the model unit and they basically plunge because of Millhouse's grapefruit. Well, a lot of people think Ralph would be a proud Canadian and all that. You never know. So anyway, the Simpsons and Canada have a strange arm-in-arm relationship, mostly due to the fact that Matt Groening actually spent some time in Winnipeg growing up and, used some Canadian influences and all that. He went back to Winnipeg for one episode. Well, as in writing the episode. So there's been plenty of Canadian episode mentions and all that. I found 11 that are pretty good. I'm not going to rank them. I'm just going to be as normal as possible. Okay, so the first massive Canadian Simpson reference I'm going to talk about is the CFL draft. When Homer decides to watch the CFL draft instead of going to Flanders' stupid barbecue, as he puts it, in that season 3 episode when Flanders failed, when Flanders uses his barbecue as a sign that he's going to actually own a left-handed business. All that. So Homer watches the CFL draft, and of course Bart, gets on Homer's nerves by enjoying the meal. Oh yeah, that's right. You can't say it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Another Canadian reference was the Grammar Rodeo in the episode Part on the Road. It's March break. Well, Skinner puts it a day early to make parent teacher you know bring your kids to work day because he would have to pay a massive fine for missing the flight because he's supposed to go to Hong Kong. So during March break, if you will, the week off, Bart ends up getting a driver's license thanks to his infatuation with the machine after spending time with Patty and Selma at the DMV as part of the the parent-student experience, and then manages to get Milhouse, Martin, and Nelson to join him to take a road trip. So they decided to tell their parents the alibi that they're going to the National Grammar Rodeo at the Sheraton Hotel in Canada. Obviously, if you're a Canadian, you know there's something fishy. It's like, what part of Canada? Say something. Because we have lots of Sheraton hotels and all that. So the alibi works and all that. Of course, Lisa is a little bit grimacing, thinking, why am I not part of the National Grammar Rodeo? Of course, we all know that the National Grammar Rodeo can't be in Canada if it is a national one, because it's in the United States. Why would nowhere in the States have this thing? Nevertheless, they end up, that was the alibi. They didn't come to Canada. They actually encountered a family from Winnipeg, which Nelson slapped the very unhinged dad and all that. Who says, we're not going to Cape Town Afro. We're going back to Winnipeg. That's Mark Graney's hometown. Nevertheless, Bart and them actually get stuck in Knoxville and all that. Um, episode episode 2 of season 8, the Hank Scorpio episode, which is pretty good and all that. You only move twice. Bart finds that his mischievous pranks and his stuff and his lack of learning actually bites him, and he gets put into the special class, if you will. However, the special class basically is full of kids that are Ralph Wiggum lookalikes, kids that have to have mittens pinned on their coats all year round. And this one kid named Gordy, who is put in the special class because his family moved from Canada and they think he's slow, eh? Stupid Americans. There are a lot of Canadians that come down to the States and are very smart. You know, the brain drain for the doctors. Another one is the famous episode, The Bart Wants What It Wants. Now, this was actually the episode that was going to hint at Canada getting a full fledged episode, if you will. This was in 2002 because I was grade 11 at the time. And there was a lot of hype that the Global Network, that's the ones that had the rights to The Simpsons until I think CACH stole it from them in the 2020s. But anyway, yeah, Global would always have the first run episodes of the show, and CBC would always have the syndication. But anyway, the episode is when Bart dates Greta Wolfcastle, and for some strange reason, he decides to go to Principal Skinner's stand-up set to heckle him rather than be with Greta at her school's dance and all that. And Bart doesn't understand things and decides to dump Greta, saying that he's cramping her style. However, when Greta comes close to Millhouse, Bart gets jealous and then learns that Greta's leaving for Toronto for a movie. You're moving to Spain? You're going to Spain? Bart, your geography just sucks. Anyway, so Bart tells his family, we got to go to Toronto to get this one, to Canada. And then Homer says, Canada, why should we leave America for America Junior? Bart says it's for love, you'll understand. And since they had to go to Europe to catch Lisa's balloon, which I doubt highly would have happened in real life, they decided to go. Marge likes how clean and bland Toronto is. I'm home. And then basically, they take pictures of stuff, the CN Tower and the Museum of Draft Dodgers. So anyway, they spend time in Toronto. They go to Paramount Studios and see Canadian graffiti as one guy spray paints, obey the rules. All that. Bart and Milhouse have a big rumble during curling for loonies, and Greta dumps both of them, accusing Milhouse of not being so masculine. And why does Milhouse have a scrunchie in his hair? How could he have a scrunchie in his hair in the first place? His hairstyle. Nevertheless, they both, Milhouse and Bart, get on the Canadian Olympic basketball team, and Bart misses a shot badly and gets named center. Of course, this was to mock it, despite the fact that the 2000 Canadian Olympic team was not that bad and even beat Yugoslavia. But anyway, that was it. And it seemed like a disappointment for me that it actually was the third act, fine, but wasn't the main episode. Anyway, there was a spelling bee episode. The spelling bee episode that Lisa becomes a star spelling bee person and even gets to the Spell Olympics. They actually dropped a hint at near the end of the second act that is in Calgary, and we all know that's Canadian, or we should. Homer then abandons Lisa and the spelling bee to try for the rib witch. He gets it, but then he comes back because the Italian guy gets the sandwiches. I'll give you the Lisa of my car. Well, Lisa, but it sounded like Lisa. Homer realizes what it is. Lisa calls out George Plimpton for telling her to take a dive. She spells the word incorrectly and basically gets everything taken away because she exposed things. But she actually gets her face on Mount Springfield because it proved that she was the best thing Springfield had done for like 6 decades or something like that, which was, of course, fake. And then there was the episode when Homer ends up being owner of the plant but is bogged down by work. Bart and Milhouse play a baseball game and all that, and Bart declares he's Tomasako Oka of the Montreal Expos, and Milhouse says he's Esteban Yan of the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, which is actually true in effect. But to say play on the playground, basically calling yourself a Montreal Expos player, that's kind of hardcore. And then in the episode Bart of War, when Bart and Milhouse are split up and put into different scout groups and all that because of their behavior. Bart's with the tribal Indians and all that, which Homer takes for granted until Marge makes him is the leader, and then of course Millhouse's cavalry kids with his father and all that. They have a big war. Barton and his crew steal Millhouse and his crew's thunder, singing the national anthem terribly. And basically, March's tears make them realize they shouldn't be fighting each other. And they sing a call, not an anthem, not a call for war, but a smooth hymn like Canada. And, you know, Sergeant Bell and the sea captain sing "Oh Canada," and then everyone joins in and all that. And Barton and Millhouse think that war is not the answer, except is not the solution, except to America's problems. And this is 2003 when they did this. Imagine nowadays. The Italian Bob, I did an episode based off. I did the episode, The Italian Bob, and talked about at the start that Lisa has a Canadian flag on her backpack, and she says that Europeans basically think that America's made some dumb mistakes over the past 5 years, and she decides to be Canadian. Unfortunately, Homer steals the thunder by basically loudly waving an American flag and all that. Although Lisa could basically says, we don't know him. The Canada Civil War. Oh yeah, that's right. In the episode in which Lisa finds out that she has a black relative in the 1860s and all that, named Cyrus, he actually marries someone that's closely affiliated with Marge, and they actually cross the border to Canada and all that. And of course, the Canadian flag is wrong in that episode because it's not the red and white flag we all know and love. That was in 1965. And to wrap this up, there's a couple of episodes that do have Canadian ties. The first one is Boy Meets Curl. That's the one I did. I did this episode, and of course, that and every other episode I did is in the playlist in the description of the YouTube video. But Boy Meets Curl is when Homer and Marge take up mixed doubles curling alongside Principal Skinner and Agnes. But of course, Agnes has problems with Skinner, saying that Skinner, with his fetus, actually cost her the 1952 high jump, pole vault. She should have said high jump because pole vault wasn't a women's sport Olympic event until 2000. High jump, definitely. So anyway, they actually qualify as part of the American team to Vancouver, and Homer correctly says, "Pack your bags. We're going to the warmest city in Canada in the winter, Vancouver," which is right. And then you go to Vancouver. Lisa has her pin-up session and everything. However, thankfully, thanks to Marge and her left-handed curling, she hid her right hand. She hid it because she didn't want to be a freak. We actually learned that Bart's left-handed in a recent season 37 episode, and Homer basically uses awkward tactics to try to keep Bart from being exposed as being left-handed. But anyway, Marge saves the team and they win gold. And of course, the last one is Midnight RX. This was the episode in which Burns throws a party at the History Museum and feels that because of drug plans and everything going up, the drug stuff, that they will not do drug plans, and basically they've had to fend for themselves. Lots of people are losing access to the drugs. Dr. Hibbert basically is dancing because now he can afford a lot of things. However, Homer and crew and Grandpa have a plan to actually sneak drugs from across the border. Homer thinks that it's Mexico, but the other border, it's Canada. So they get Canadian drugs on the cheap and then take it back to the Springfield people. Ned, Apu, and Ned and Apu actually barge themselves into the next mission and all that. And Apu's upset that Ned's trying to convert him from Hinduism. So anyhow, they get the drugs, they meet the Canadian Flanders, and then they do the diddly Scott, and then the Canadian guy says, "Want to puff out a reeferino? It's legal here." And Ned said, "They told me Satan was attractive." Ooh la la, Sassoon. So anyway, they are stopped at the border. Unfortunately, Apu drinks some terrible, drinks Ned's hot coffee and goes hot, hot, hot. And then he gets a towel wrapped around his head, and you know what he looks like. Don't have to tell you. And then Homer gets exposed for his drugs because they keep spilling from his pockets. He and the other three are basically told to leave Canada, and the guy even tries to get the French interpreter to call himself a big, big loser, and almost does. Nevertheless, that plan's world. But then Mr. Burns, after realizing Smithers is sick, needs to get the drugs for Smithers, so he decides to commandeer a plane with Abe and Homer, and they manage to get that. However, when the plane's about to crash and all that, Burns leaves Homer and Abe to fend for themselves. Abe's about to be arrested for everything until the residents of Springfield said that it works out. Nelson's diaper rash is being cured. Really? And Central Mel's lactose intolerant stuff is getting fixed. So Grandpa and Homer are set free. Burns gives Smithers the stuff, and Smithers enjoys Burns' quote unquote kiss. And then, of course, Burns keeps the drug plan, and then it works out. But yeah, Canada is a great, wonderful land and all that. We're not all stupid. We're pretty decent and all that. Our calm nature works out. And yes, Canada has some political turmoil. I mean, Mark Carney hasn't done too much and all that. The Liberal government has spent too many years in office. The opposition, the Conservatives are basically crying over every little thing and all that. And of course, Alberta wanting to separate from Canada because they're upset with Canada, the Canadian things, and says we can be on our own. But the First Nations people say no, and I doubt that. I think Danielle Smith will probably turn Alberta over to the United States, surrender Alberta to the United States, like the coward she is. But that's just me. So this episode is done. We will have our normal Saturday episode, and ironically, is on the 4th of July. If the 4th of July landed on a Friday or a Sunday, we would do that episode. Like the episode would have been on a Friday or Sunday and just leave Saturday alone. But because the episode is on a Saturday, ironically enough, we will be doing the 4th of July episode. And no, there's no real 4th of July Simpsons episode. But we are going to season 15, and we're going to go to a episode in which the Simpsons skewer the American mentality of 2003 with the episode The Bart Mangle Banner. You know, the one that Bart moons the American flag without realizing it, and everything gets overblown, and they go to Alcatraz. I will be doing that episode on Saturday, and there will be another midweek episode next Tuesday because I have to go to the dentist and miss work. So before I go to the dentist and get my teeth fixed, I will be reviewing the episode. I will be doing a who did it best, March versus Monorail or Springfield Connections. Season 4 blew up with two of the greatest episodes of all time, so I talk about that. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Happy Canada Day. Adieu.